Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Jeanette Alomia, Director of Guidance for the Huntington Schools. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We have great information for you. We want to make sure that you walk away feeling excited, but you might be a little overwhelmed with all the information, but we want to make sure that you know this information ahead of time, that you know what to do as 10th grade and 11th grade parents and students with regards to life at the high school, course selection, as well as the college admissions process. So, so tonight's event is going to be a variety of information, and so first and foremost, we will have our guest speaker, Ms. Lori Wax from Penn State University, who will be discussing the college admissions process and what you need to know at this point as grade 10 and 11 students and parents. She will also conduct a Q&A session when it comes to the college admissions process. And she will make the information relevant so that, again, while your student and while you are navigating through these next couple of years, that you know what to do and what to expect when your child becomes a senior, right, when it comes to post-secondary planning. After the information and the Q&A session, we will be having a counselor breakout session where you'll be assigned to different locations according to and meet with your counselor. And so your counselor will be discussing various topics. You should have the packet. If you have not grabbed one, they're on the table outside, as well as tonight's PowerPoint presentation. And so, of course, this is a time during the breakout session where you can ask questions and get to know your counselor even more. And then after tonight, well, we welcome you to make appointments. We welcome you to set up your pre-registration individual meetings with our counselors. They'll speak about that as well. We welcome you to partake on the course selection adventure. Our curriculum guide for the 23-24 has already been posted on the website. We welcome you to get to know, what is life at the high school, and also what does the guidance department has to offer. And so, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to Ms. Wax. So Lori Wax is a Long Island native and lives nearby in the Harborfield School District. She has a Bachelor of Science in Communications from Northwestern University. After working in broadcasting for many years, she took time off to raise her family. During that period, she remained active on the Alumni Admission Council for her alma mater and helped to develop an educational foundation in her community where she served as co-president for 10 years. Lori's passion for higher ed led her to work for a college consulting company advising students, and then to admissions for UMass Lowell, where she spent 6 years recruiting in the New York metro region. She joined the Penn State family in September of 2020 and is so happy to be back to recruiting in person this year. Yay, in person. And then Lori has experienced the college application process firsthand with her own 3 children and loves helping students and families navigate the college process to find the right college fit. Please help me welcome from Penn State University, Ms. Lori Wax.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us tonight. There's a lot of information, and try not to be overwhelmed. This is as 10th graders and 10th grade parents and 11th graders and 11th grade parents. This is a good time just to hear this. You're going to hear this again and again, but at least this way you have an idea of what to expect within this process. So let me just. So it's sort of a 2-part process because first you're trying to decide, where do I want to apply? Where do I want to go to college? So there are several factors that you have to take into consideration when trying to find the right college. And I will say that there are thousands of excellent colleges out there. There's not one right fit. You could probably really thrive and flourish in a number of different universities and colleges. So it's really just a matter of finding a right fit. And just keep an open mind in this process. So first and foremost, you want to find a good academic fit. So as a student, you know where you are, you know where your grades are. At this point, you may probably have not taken any tests yet, but you can see each college will publish their middle 50% ranges of what students who are at that school, what kinds of grades that they came into from high school with. So that can help you try to determine where you might fit academically. But there are other factors, and a lot of them are somewhat subjective. There's no right or wrong. It's a matter of personal preference. So do you want to go to a public school or a private school? If it's a private school, do you want it to have a religious affiliation or be or not affiliated with the religion? So those are some factors. Just how far from home are you willing to be? Are you willing to get on a plane and go to school, or do you want to be within a certain driving radius? So that is another factor to consider. What kind of a geographic environment? Are you somebody who really wants to be out in the country or in the suburbs, or are you a real city person and would thrive in a city? So again, all of these are factors that you will consider when you're trying to decide where should I apply to college, but they are all really very subjective. So another thing is, how large of a school do you want to go to? There are some really small schools. There are some giant schools. I happen to work for a giant school. Then there are schools in between. So, what is the right environment for you? And sometimes it's hard to know that. How do you know if you'd be better off in a big or a small school? And I really encourage you, when you're able to start visiting, 10th grade is honestly a great time. I wouldn't be running out every weekend and going to visit colleges, but when you're away, if you're on a trip somewhere, or you're anywhere you are, even if you're just going around Long Island, go check out maybe Stony Brook, where you're a real suburban location. Maybe go into the city and check out NYU or Columbia, just to get a sense of different size schools, different environments, and that'll help you to narrow down this process. Other things, programs of study. If you know exactly what you want and there's a specific school that maybe is expert in that particular program, maybe that's something that you want to do. If you have no idea, which is really quite common, nobody really should know exactly what they want to do with their whole life, especially at 16 or 17 years old. Go to a school or look for schools that maybe offer a lot of different options so that you have time to explore and choose. Also, what kind of campus life are you looking for? Are you looking for something that's a really big, athletic, a lot of, activities and real, spirited school? Or do you want something that's a little bit more laid back? So again, all personal preference. You do want also to think about the cost. And I will say, I would not just assume that a public school is going to be less expensive than a private school. There are scholarships that many private schools offer, so you definitely want to take into account cost, but I wouldn't make any assumptions with that. And then also other factors: ethnic, geographic diversity. What's important to you, and all of this information is available on every college website. And then, what other enriching opportunities do schools offer? Are you looking to study abroad? Are you looking to make sure you get an internship? Most schools are going to be able to offer you those opportunities, but if those are important to you, you definitely want to make sure that it's available to you. And additionally, support services. So again, most schools are offering different support services, but definitely important to investigate that. And any of the factors that are your priorities are things that you should take into account when you're making these decisions. So those are the things that you should consider when you're trying to wind down and narrow down where you should apply. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we are looking at as colleges out of our applicants. First and foremost, for pretty much any college, we are looking at your high school transcript. We're looking at your academic record. So we're certainly looking at the classes that you take, the level of difficulty of those classes, and how you're doing in those classes. I definitely encourage you to challenge yourself and take rigorous classes, but I don't encourage you to struggle. So you really want to find that balance. Take the classes that are the most challenging that you can do while doing reasonably well? I get that question all the time. I've been getting it this week with students asking, I don't know, I'm really struggling through AP calculus. Is it okay if I take regular calculus? You shouldn't have to struggle. So again, rigor of coursework is important, but it's really, your grades are even more important. SAT and ACT scores. So there are standardized tests that have been, for the most part, most schools have been test optional for the past few years since the pandemic. So I don't know, as far as Penn State, we have not yet announced if we are going to be test optional next year. So for seniors this year, we are test optional. For all of you, we haven't made that announcement yet, and the same goes for many other schools. A lot will remain test optional, and there was a growing number of schools that were becoming test optional even prior to the pandemic. But now, there certainly are a lot, and I think, I know as far as Penn State was concerned, we were really trying to see that students were equally successful, graduating at the same rate, as students that applied with the test score, as students that applied without the test score. So what does test optional mean? Because that's something that, well, I guess I'll get into it. I'm just going to quickly cover these. So college essay is another factor in your application, letters of recommendation, your extracurricular activities, any special talents that you have, if you're an athlete or a musician possibly, demonstrated interest. I'll talk about all these in a little more detail, and legacy, all factors that go into this process. So back to the high school transcript. So again, as I mentioned, the most important aspect of your application. And when you're looking at middle 50% ranges and you're looking at your GPA from Huntington High School, every high school on Long Island and every high school in the country weights differently. Does weight, doesn't weight, has a different value. So usually what most schools are looking at are your unweighted, the class you took, the unweighted grade you received in that class, and most of us are recalculating. So we do give value to IB classes, AP classes, honors classes, but it might not be the same value that you get here in Huntington. I know Harborfields gives a 15% bump up. I don't know, what do you guys give for an AP class? Oh, I'm sorry? 10. Right. So is that fair that you're compared to somebody who's getting a 15% bump up? So we don't do that. We will give everybody the same value for any of their classes that you take. So again, the rigor of coursework, you don't want to struggle, but you want to take what you can manage. So we're really also looking mainly at your core courses. So we love to see your electives, but really what we're focused on are your core classes. If you are applying into a STEM field, we're looking really carefully at your math and science grades. And then, certainly subject-specific grades. Another thing to keep in mind, and now that you're making course selections for your classes, if you have an idea of something that you might want to study, for instance, engineering, or even at some schools in our business school, you have to have at least pre-calculus to apply to those programs. So keep in mind, if you're thinking right now, I might want to be an engineer, that you want to make sure you have the math level that will enable you to apply into that major. So, and as far as, math goes, there are different state requirements all around the country. So in New York, only 3 years of math are required, but many states require 4. You don't want to limit yourself. I really encourage you to stick with your math all 4 years, just because you definitely will limit yourself, and many schools do have some form of math science requirements as a general education requirement, and you want to be able to do well in those by not having not taken it for a year. So back to the standardized tests. So there's the SAT and there's the ACT. I would recommend, and even if things are test optional, I do recommend taking the tests, because for test optional schools, we will look at your test grades if you submit them, and if you have a great test score, it'll certainly help your application. But if you don't submit it, that's okay too. We'll place a greater emphasis on your grades. But you don't know if you're a good test taker until you take the test. So I do recommend take the ACT, take the SAT. It's hard to know which one you will do better on. Take it, once. I do recommend, trying to get the book and prepare a little bit, try to do a practice one in a timed setting so that you are getting a real sense of what it would be like to take the test. And then take it once, maybe I would recommend taking, whichever one you do better, take that one a second time. I would not take it more than 3 times. 3 times would be your absolute limit. But some schools will super score where they'll take the highest math portion and the highest reading portion. Penn State does not happen to super score, but I believe most schools do. So either way, I would take the tests, and then you could, if you're not a test taker, if you get done and you're applying to a test optional school and your test scores weren't great, just don't submit them. Some schools are test blind, and that means they won't even look at your test, so don't even bother. But I think the majority of the schools are test optional at this point. And again, we're waiting to see what's going to be for next year and the year after. So the next portion of a college application is a personal essay. Now, you're a ways off from this. I mean, the tests you just have to start thinking about because you want to prepare to take them, and you might want to give yourself a chance to take them more than once. But you're a little bit, far from your college essay. However, it's not a bad idea to know exactly to know what is expected, and honestly, it's just a chance for you to speak directly to an admissions counselor who's reading your application. So you may get to meet with the person that's reading your application. I read many of the applications from here for Penn State. I don't read all of them, but you may not, and this is your chance. Your grades are your grades. Your test scores are your test scores. All the other components are not really things that you can control this late in the game, as a senior when you're writing these essays. But this is your chance to really tell us something about you. There are some, tips we can talk about. It's a whole other presentation, or writing college essays, but just a couple of things to keep in mind. You definitely want to highlight your achievements, share your passions. It's an opportunity for you to explain certain situations, although there is room on the Common App, which I don't know how many of you even know what the Common App is yet, but it's a application one general application that you can use to apply to many different schools. But in any case, there is room on that for you to explain certain situations. So you can or don't have to use that as part of your personal statement. And you just kind of want to set yourself apart and let me get to know you a little bit. So, and you're going to have, there are options of topics that you can choose to discuss. The one advice I have is there is one that's topic of your choice. You can write about anything. If you do choose a topic to write about, or if you choose a prompt to respond to, make sure you're responding to that prompt. So, and here we go. So some quick essay do's and don'ts. And again, I know this is a little premature, so, but I'll just quickly, consider the prompt again. Stay within the word count, which is something that you don't need to worry about until well after you've written the essay. I wouldn't go into writing an essay worrying about the word count. Right? It's very easy to cut back. Always be positive about yourself and others. You can anything that's not common knowledge, like anything that maybe a certain club in your high school that you assume everybody knows about, but I wouldn't maybe know about. Make sure you're explaining that. Do not write about flaws or obstacles that you haven't overcome. And, be careful not to write anything that might be in any way offensive to anybody. So there's one main essay that you write on the Common Application for all the colleges that you apply to. But then many colleges will have an additional essay that's specific to their college that you also will write. And oftentimes those essays are more specifically about why you might want to go to that particular college. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're all kinds of questions that they're asking just to try to get a sense of you. They'll ask you your top 5, books that you've read, or your top, there's so many different things that schools will ask. But in any case, these are just some of the components of your application when you do get to that point and you're applying to college. Another portion of your application is our letters of recommendation. Every school is different. Penn State doesn't actually require letters of recommendation. Well, we will certainly read anything that you send to us. Some schools will require 1 recommendation. Some will require 2. Some will really want you to limit that, and they'll say no more than 2 or no more than 3. Make sure whatever the college says, you are going to send exactly what they want. It's hard to keep track of things because every school, there are so many things that are overlapping and similar, and so many things that are very specific to each school. So my recommendation when you get to the point that you've come up with a college list is that you put together a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet, you list your schools, list the deadlines, list the requirements, just keeping it easy. Another tip I'm going to just mention now, and it's not really in order, but you have the advantage of, if you haven't yet taken any kind of ACT or SAT, when you do that and you give your email address, colleges all over the country are buying that information and sending you lots of emails and things in the mail, which is fine and it's great and it's a great way for you to learn about things. But when you do ultimately apply to school, I would use a different email. I have so many students that miss really important emails that we send them because your inbox as a senior is going to be packed. I know this from my own experience with my own kids. It's hard to keep track. Students aren't in the habit of checking emails. You will get there because that is how colleges do communicate. But I would recommend when you do go to set up your start to apply to college, think about having an email that you use only for the colleges that you apply to. And another good thing about a letter of recommendation is that it is also an opportunity. I have read applications from students that I would never know there was anything going on. And then I read a letter from a counselor that, tells me something about the student that I would never have known, that I'm like, I cannot believe the student has gone through all this and didn't even mention it. So it's a great place for you if you do have something that you don't really want to write in your essay and you don't really want to bring attention to it yourself, but you do think it's important for us to know. A letter of recommendation is a great place to put that. So another piece that we're looking at is your extracurricular involvement. Many schools have lots of clubs and organizations. We all like to have a vibrant student life. Penn State has 1,200 different clubs and organizations, so we need students to fill all those clubs. So we definitely care about what you're involved with and how you spend your time. That does not mean that you should list 20 different activities and just quickly get involved because it's good for your college resume. Pick a few things that you're really passionate about and get involved with them. And a lot of students don't have the opportunity to get involved in school clubs. You may have responsibilities at home. You may have to get a sibling off a bus. You may have a grandparent that you need to get home for. You may have a job, which is really a great thing to put on your resume because that takes a lot of discipline and really it says a lot about you as far as your maturity goes. So definitely it does not have to be a school club to have value. Everything you do has value. And again, if you have home responsibilities like that prevent you from getting involved in things that you might have liked to, definitely let us know about that. It's something you can put on your resume. So demonstrating interest is a very interesting thing. There are some schools that absolutely will tell you we track interest. We want to know that you've visited our campus. We want to know that you've reached out. If I show up for a visit at your school, we want you to come. There are schools that definitely track interest. And then there are many schools that do not track interest. We technically do not track interest. It is not part of our evaluation that we're tracking interest. That being said, every school is tracking interest. Every time we send you an email, we know when you open it. If I come to visit your school, I will keep track. I will know that you stopped by. If you send an email to us, every interaction we are aware of. So, it can never hurt to show your interest. So if you came to a college night tonight, but let's say I come to visit in your college office, and you are interested in my school, certainly showing up cannot hurt. And if you can't show up because you have a really important class that you can't miss, you can always send an email and say, I'm sorry I missed you, would have loved to stop by, just to show your interest. And again, not every school does track it, but it can never hurt. It's never a bad thing. We all like to be liked, and definitely sometimes it comes down to a couple of students, and you have less spots than students, and you want to give the spots you have to students that you think want to be there. So again, can't hurt. There are so many ways. If there's a college fair, you can stop by at the table. There are some schools do interviews, not all, but if that is available to you, certainly take advantage of it. Usually the interviews that are given are alumni interviews. They're usually more informative than evaluative, but certainly worth doing if you have that opportunity. But you're a ways off from that. All things that we'll repeat again, I'm sure, several times before you're applying. So here's just a little bit of a timeline for junior year. And I won't read it all to you, but you guys can see it. You have the PowerPoint in your hands. But at this point, you're really trying to do as well as you can in school, because honestly, that's the most important thing you can do to really have the choices that you want to have in the college application process. But you can certainly start visiting schools, start to reach out to schools, get information about them. There are college fairs. You're going to have one here. You had one recently. You're going to have another one in March. Come into it, stop by the tables, maybe find out which schools are going to be here in advance and do a little research about them beforehand. It's easy things to do, and you can just easily show your interest that way, and also learn things that you need to know. So when you do get to apply, there are different ways that you can apply to school. There are different application plans. There is early action, which is a great way to go. For some schools, like Penn State, it is really a very important way to go because of the volume of applications we get. Early action means you apply early, you hear early, but you're not bound to go to that school. You don't have to let the school know until May 1st, which is the National College Decision Day. But you're applying early and you're finding out early, and then you're good to go. What a nice way to spend the second half of your senior year, knowing you're into school and you can relax and see where else you get into, but at least you know you're in. That's one plan. Early decision is a binding plan. Now, for some really very selective schools, your chances of being admitted through early decision are significantly greater because they know that you're going to come. It is a binding plan, and so there's definitely a larger percentage of students that apply early decision that are admitted than students that apply regular decision. But you have to be sure that you want to go to that school. I mean, it's a binding, legal, like, you sign things, so you really want to be sure that that's where you want to go. There are some schools that offer ED2, early decision 2. So you're not sure yet, you're not ready to apply early decision, or you do apply early decision to one school, you're not admitted to that school, you can apply early decision to another school that offers that. So not everybody does, but there are several schools that do offer that option. Regular decision is just usually there's a deadline, maybe January 1st usually, but there's some variation, and you apply by that date. You hear sometime March by April, and then you have to let the school know by May 1st. And then there's rolling decision. So rolling decision or rolling admissions is when, as schools get applications, they read them and send out decisions. And there can be a mix of that. Just as an example, Penn State has early action, which we get a lot of applications, and we make the majority of our offers probably come through early action. So I always encourage students to apply that way. However, we then do have rolling admissions. So after early action, we will review applications on a rolling basis as they come in. We read all the applications that come in November, and then all of the applications that come in December, and so on and so forth. The chances of, certainly at Penn State, we have 20 different campuses. So the chances of getting your top choice are less the later you apply. For schools that are just one school, it's just the less spots that are available at any school, the more competitive it is. So, but it is an option, and there are definitely schools that are still making offers. As long as they have spots, they'll keep reading applications. So, and again, on your spreadsheet that you keep, that's another what application plans are available to you at that school, what deadlines do they have, and that way, if you have all that information, it'll make it much easier to keep track and decide what to do. And that pretty much wraps up. I feel like I was giving you a lot of information that is a little early for you, but I think it's good to hear it, and certainly happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes. So again, I would, as with everything else, when you come up with your list of schools, I would reach out to each school directly and ask that question because it does differ. But I can say for sure that for many schools, particularly I think the large public universities that get a lot of applications, early action definitely helps you because you're just as they're making decisions. But that does not apply to every big public school. I know there are some that will defer a lot of their early action students and then end up admitting them later on, but they are kind of waiting to hold out to see who else applies. We don't happen to do that because it's just how we manage the volume that we get. As far as early decision, that almost always increases your chances because the school knows that you are definitely coming. So I think for a lot of the Ivy Leagues that offer early decision, the percentage, and the other schools they call the little Ivies that are very competitive. They're not Ivy League schools, but they're very selective schools. The ones that offer early decision, oftentimes you can go onto the websites and check it. It's not a secret. They publish their acceptance rates. But for the most part, the percentage of students that are admitted through early decision is much greater than regular decision. Not every school offers early decision. Not every school offers early action. So I think it's important just to know the questions to ask. And once you get your list of schools, you can reach out. I mean, all these things, tracking interest, number of recommendations, super scoring, every single thing is a question to ask each school that you're interested in applying to. But great question. Anybody else? Yes. Great question. So there are schools that when you apply early action, they call it restricted early action, and you can only apply to that school, but you're usually allowed to apply to public schools. So it's usually a private school, I think, like maybe Yale, Harvard, Stanford. I don't know who else has that, but I think those three, I believe, if you apply early action, you can apply to other schools. You can only apply to a state school. So you can certainly apply to any of the SUNYs. You can apply to Penn State, anything that's a public school. Then for early decision, you can apply early decision and you can apply to 10 other schools. But if you get into your early decision school, you have to go back and rescind your application from all of the other schools that you applied to because you're committed to going to the school you applied early decision to. So early action, and some schools, we have early action, you can apply wherever you want. So it really, again, like with everything else, it's individual, by school. But that, the restricted early action is, to certain schools, and it's usually reserved to some really highly selective schools. You're welcome. Anybody else? Yes. We're up from last year already. I'm baffled by it, but we are up already from last year by a significant amount. So we do see a number. I mean, I think, there are some factors. The Common App makes it easy to apply to a lot of schools. Test optional opens up doors to students that might have just, self-selected themselves out of applying someplace, and now they're like, why not? My grades are good. So we've definitely seen an increase in applications. I don't know what the trend will be. I just know that this year we are up again so far. So compared to the same time last year. So I don't know how it'll end up at the end, but right now we are. So, but good question. Yes. So again, it depends on the school, but in my experience, there are not a lot of schools that require an interview. There are some schools that offer an interview. If you're being interviewed by somebody in the admissions office, maybe that is evaluative, but if you're being evaluated by an alum, I'm sure, and I did this for my own alma mater, I did interview students, and I feel like they, the school certainly took it a little bit into account, but not really. I don't think it was going to override all the other factors that they were looking at. It can never hurt. It's a good opportunity. I recommend doing it if it's available. We don't offer them. The only thing we do interviews for is our honors college. Those are optional, but we do offer them. But general admission, we don't. But again, every school is different. So when you get your list of where you want to apply, that's the time to and add that to your spreadsheet, one more column. You're welcome. Anybody else? Oh, sorry. It's like hard to see. So, this again, we're just human, so it is a little bit subjective. I can't speak for everybody else. I can't even speak for everybody else at Penn State. I know when I read applications, and I am in a situation very often where, let's say I have 10 students and they're all pretty comparable in their scores and their grades, and I have 6 spots. So what am I doing? So I am looking at all the other factors, and I wouldn't say there's one over the other. I wouldn't say it's the essay. Sometimes there's an essay that's just a wow. So I guess if anything, that probably is my favorite thing. But then again, sometimes I've read recommendations that I'm like, I had no idea. I am so blown away by what the student has been through and what they've accomplished now, knowing what they've been through. So it's a combination. It really is. There's not one single thing. You're looking at the whole picture and trying to find the best, fit. And it's all. I mean, I do. We don't technically track interest, but if I'm in that situation and there's a student that has really reached out and expressed interest, you can't help but not, want to give that student a little bit of a leg up. But it really is all of those other factors. So once it's beyond grades and scores, it's all of the other factors. So I'm sorry, it's not a definite. I can't choose one. They're all important parts of it. What students are involved. They're all important. Every aspect of it is important, and it's like your whole person comes from all the different pieces of it. So, but good question. Anybody else? Yes. Absolutely. So many schools, and particularly a lot of the large public universities, do have honors programs, and they vary. So again, you need to look them up by school, but I can speak about Penn State in particular. So we have an honors program. It is a separate application. I know that there are some schools. The school I worked for prior to Penn State also had an honors program, but you were automatically considered for it based on your grades and your scores. Which is great. A lot of people were eligible for it, and the perks, which are the same as our perks, usually are that you get to take honors level classes in whatever subject you're studying. You graduate with that distinction. Most schools give you the opportunity to pre-register for classes, which is really nice. I know at Penn State we have a lot of resources. They have their own career services office in addition to all of our career services offices, and we have several. But we have an honors college, and I think this is the same for most of the honors colleges. There's a specific residential hall that you have the opportunity to live in if you're part of the honors college. There's also scholarships usually that we have a $5,000 a year scholarship for our honors program. I know others. I know the school I used to work for also had a scholarship for the honors program. So they're definitely worth checking out. It's really nice when you're automatically considered for them. Unfortunately, with Penn State, it's a pretty extensive application, and it is a separate application that you do have to complete. But they're all worth investigating because there are definitely some perks to them. So again, I can really only speak to Penn State about this. I have no idea who's applying for financial aid. I am only involved in admissions. The only time I ever hear about financial aid is when students reach out directly to me. We have a student aid office. That's who handles it. So if you apply early action to Penn State, you'll get your decision before you get any financial aid. So our financial aid works, and I think most schools are looking for you to fill out the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. It's an application that is available to everybody. You fill it out. It's how it is determined what you can afford to pay for school. Not everybody agrees with it, they say, but that is what we use. That is what everybody uses. So we ask that you have that in by December 1st so that we can give an aid award notification in February. So that you will, so some schools you're going to get a package when you get your decision. For us, if you apply later, you might, but for early action, usually you'll hear before. But again, you don't have to let us know until May 1st, so it's really okay. And, there are some schools that if you have a certain grade point average, there's an automatic scholarship that you get. So that's another thing to look into. We don't happen to have that, unfortunately, but there are schools that do. So you can really look up. Usually it is separate from admission. So I would go on to student aid websites for colleges that you're considering. Most schools have what they call a tuition calculator on the website where you can go put in your household income and have an idea of what you might be expected to pay. It's not as definite as once you apply with the FAFSA, but at least it can give you a ballpark. Yes. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think our calculators on our website, we're truly trying to give people an idea of what it's going to cost them. Because I will say we don't have a lot of merit scholarships at all. Most of our aid is need-based. So it is important that people know what they're going to be expecting to pay because, again, there just aren't a ton of merit scholarships. Again, anybody else? I'm so sorry. I can't see so well. Yes. Is that it? Well, feel free. I think my email was on here. Yeah, you're welcome to reach out to me. If you certainly have any questions about Penn State, but even if you have general questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Wax, for that information and for that presentation. So at this time, I'm going to... So I'm going to wrap up the evening by giving you the option you can stay in the auditorium if you have further questions for Ms. Wax. Alternatively, you can meet with your counselor if you have any questions. Definitely, these are the locations. So for students that have a counselor with Ms. Salomia, they will remain in the auditorium. Mrs. Alvallero, you'll go to Cafeteria A. Ms. Bonilla, room 110. Mrs. Brunoni, Cafeteria B. Mrs. Hernandez, room 109. Mr. Lashen, room 140. And Ms. Marcellin, room 141. So, counselors, if you can please go to your locations. Thank you. So Ms. Hernandez. And thank you so much for coming this evening. Have a great night.